Bin Mohammed Rafi, and here is my YouTube channel. A very serious subject which blackened the pages of history and has made this world believe in lies and fabricated stories, and exaggerated from hundreds to millions, and that I think is found in the Holocaust and the numbers of people who were killed in a Holocaust, and the vivid imagination of those dirty and filthy, greedy Jews who wanted to claim compensations and in revenge, and as killing is in their blood, killing of women and children, and I'll just prove you with that what they were doing and how they fabricated the story and replaced the showers which they were being given to clean them because they had not cleaned themselves after going to toilet, and they were obviously isolated, and nowhere there were any comparison of that kind of genocide. And if you look at the world history, you will never ever find the cruelest creatures on this earth than you have found in these Jews. The few, just a tiny bit number of the Jews who were religious, who kept following Torah and respect Prophet Moses, and they did not involve themselves in the killing of so many prophets. They are excluded, and they are few, and they are as respectable as anybody, Muslims, Christians, or anybody, or any decent human being in this world, and they are here everywhere in the world, but they are so tiny and they have no voice, they don't have power, they don't have money, they don't fight, they are not in the IDF, and they are not in those war criminals and the killers. But they have plenty who join them, birds of the same feather flock together in the Christian world, because they intoxicated them with their false news. And I'll present to you a Jewish woman who will show you the showers being given, and she said how these Jews fabricated the figures only to get from Swiss banks the money of the Germans, so that they should, they actually thrived on their sympathy and the sympathy of the whole world. Up until today, they are doing this thing, and they made a fool of the whole European continent, all the West, and particularly the United States of America, which has been just like a pet and a puppy dog, which has wigged its tail as the Jews just pulled them. And again, their price was paid by Apex, the Jewish organizations. Now, for the first time, you are going to see that these people are going to be arrested and hanged, just as the Germans, those people who were involved. And I'm not saying that they were not involved. There was some killing. There was, obviously, because these people had destroyed this German society, the European society, with homosexuality, with adultery, with loan sharking, with controlling their own money and killing their women, children, and elderly. And they were the most hated. And the greatest proof is that when they wanted the whole European and the Americans, they all got together, especially the British and them. And why on earth they took these Jews, if they had any sympathy with them on the European countries or America, and not go and take to the Palestinian, the cleanest and the purest land of the prophets. They put these dirty scum of the society over there, and you see this many similarities between these Jews who've been killing women, children of Gaza, and considering genocide, starving them, closing all the borders, and now they are knowing fully well that they lived underground in their tunnels, and they are now want to send, water them so that they can drown and die suffocation. Now, draw the comparison between the Bosnian genocide, draw the comparison between what they claim as Holocaust, which is nonsense, nothing like that. to that extent occurred. Obviously, there were some killings, as I said, but they were certainly not in millions. They were much in few thousand. It was almost impossible to burn millions of.
So here's the sequence. 1979, the so-called father of Israeli intelligence, a guy called Issa Harel, told an American journalist there was going to be an Islamic attack on New York's biggest building. The same year, Benjamin Netanyahu held a conference about the need for a war on terrorism. He wrote a book. He became prime minister eventually, and in 1996, Richard Pearl fronted a group to produce a document for him called A Clean Break. And this called for as much inter-Arab conflict to be generated as possible. And then, a year later, the same Richard Pearl was one of the founders of the Project for the New American Century, co-founded by William Crystal and Robert Kagan, calling for American troops to fight multiple theater wars in the Middle East. It said that this would be necessarily slow, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. This was in September 2000, and 9 months after they came to power, America had what Bush called at the time the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century.
Well, it's not what you think it is.
I have had long conversations over the past 2 weeks with contacts at the Army War College, at Headquarters Marine Corps, and I've made it absolutely clear in both cases that it is 100% certain that 9/11 was a Mossad operation. And what I showed them immediately afterwards, the third building at the World Trade Center going down, WBC-7. And they look at that, and I said, now you understand that if one of the buildings was wired for demolition, all of them were wired for demolition. And what Americans need to understand, they did it. They did it. And if they do understand that, Israel will flat-ass disappear from this earth. 9/11 has led directly to 60,000 Americans dead and wounded. God knows how many hundreds of thousands of people in other countries that we've killed or wounded or made homeless. If Americans ever know that Israel did this, they're going to scrub them off the earth. And they're not going to give a rat's ass what the cost is. They are not going to care. They will do it. The Zionists are playing this as truly an all-or-nothing exercise. Because if they lose this one, if the American people ever realize what's happened, they're done. It'll be a bloody, brutal war, and they're gone. I mean, it's not even going to be a close contest. 3 buildings went down. The third was not hit by a plane. It was wired for controlled demolition. Therefore, all of them were wired for controlled demolition. You know, what I have done when I presented it to these people, and I said, just look at this. Look at this picture. You know, I'm not going to give you an argument. Just look at it. And they look at the film, and without exception, they come back and they say, they did it, didn't they? I said, yep, they did. They did 9/11.
This world is not what you think it is.
Back when it first happened, I didn't know who did it, but it was obvious to me in my time in the Marine Corps and doing demolition that it was definitely a controlled blast.
They were going to gas us. I have to tell you that this is really true. This is what happened. And what happened eventually is that they rained from the shower heads. They rained soap and water on us. And the reason for that was that we had to be deloused. We were so full of lice through that. Our hair was cut. And they rained soap and water on us. I do not remember if there were any towels, but we came out, and this happened prior. You see, we had to be clean to be to be naturalized. Yes. So this happened prior to that.
Otherwise.
That's right.
Germans had to be clean in
That's
those
right.
days,
And I remember how embarrassed these people were to sit there stark naked. So when I hear about the shower heads and the Holocaust and all of that, I know exactly what it was. That was soap and water raining down on us to delouse us. That's what it was. And where the story came from, that those were dangerous shower heads, I don't know. That must have come out of the Russian propaganda in those years, because I remember it very clearly, that there was a rumor,
In other words,
we were going to be done in.
These simple
Yeah.
people were afraid of this procedure?
We were afraid of this procedure, yeah. And if I can tell, you can cut it out if
So,
it doesn't
it's
belong.
like Steven Spielberg, that
pretty much.
everybody in Schindler's List
Yeah.
is waiting for the gas to come
Yeah,
in.
and all it
lo and
is
behold, all it was
soap and water
was
came
water.
raining down on us in this great big, we called it banya, which is a Russian word for a washroom. Bathroom, yeah, but it
big
was a
communal
big one,
bath,
a
yeah.
communal bathroom. It was huge, I would say. It was, the way I remember it, of course, I was little, but the way I remember it, I would say it was at least 30 by 30. It must have been built for that purpose, to wash us down like dogs. Yeah.
But most people, of course, don't know is that the Germans had drawn a line from the Baltic, or actually from the North Cape virtually all the way down to the Bosporus.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that came across that line, whether he was German or Mennonite, Jews for that matter, anybody in Europe could not go across that line without being deloused, because they wanted to keep lice out of Europe,
That's
because lice were so dangerous to
That's
public
right.
health.
That's right. So that was
Don't
the
feel
first.
badly, you were not
No.
picked on because we were
Yeah,
Mennonites
yeah.
or Lutherans.
Or the same for the cutting of hair. I mean, we were all shorn bald in order to stop the lice, the louse problem that we
Yeah.
had. Everybody had lice in the war. You know,
So-
I mean, this was just common knowledge that everybody had lice. And then, of course, we had to be deloused and put into Germany.
So Jews cannot
No,
claim unique victim status.
No, they cannot.
You-
And when I hear the stories about them losing their hair, big deal. None of us had hair.
What if I told you that a blind Bulgarian mystic who died nearly 3 decades ago predicted exactly what's happening to Donald Trump in America right now? What if her visions about 2026 are unfolding before our very eyes, and we're only just beginning to understand the terrifying accuracy of her words? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will send chills down your spine. Her name was Baba Vanga, and she's been called the Nostradamus of the Balkans. Born in 1911, she lost her sight at the age of 12 during a massive dust storm that nearly took her life. But according to legend, when she emerged from that storm, blind and changed forever, she had gained something far more powerful than physical sight. She could see the future, and what she saw about America, about its leaders, and about the year 2026 is happening right now. Before we dive deep into her exactly 2 years into Trump's return to power, look around you right now. The national debt is at unprecedented levels. Inflation has ravaged savings. The relationship between America and its traditional allies is more strained than ever. China and Russia are forming deeper partnerships. Middle Eastern nations are exploring alternatives to the dollar. The BRICS nations are creating their own currency systems. Every single economic indicator Baba Vanga described is manifesting before our eyes. But the economic predictions are only part of the story. Baba Vanga also spoke about natural disasters and climate events that would devastate America in 2026. She described massive storms, earthquakes in unexpected places, and what she called fire from the sky. She said these events would be seen as signs, as warnings that humanity was on the wrong path. Whether you believe in climate change or not, the increase in severe weather events is undeniable. Record-breaking hurricanes, unprecedented wildfires, polar vortexes bringing Arctic conditions to the south. The patterns she described are already forming. Baba Vanga said that betrayal would come from unexpected places, that people he trusted would turn against him, and that by 2026 he would learn that his greatest enemies were not across the political aisle, but much closer to home. She spoke of a great purge, of revelations about corruption that would extend to both political parties, and of Trump being forced to stand alone against a system that wanted him gone. Now, here's something that skeptics often point out, and it's worth addressing. Baba Vanga's predictions were never written down by her directly. She was blind and illiterate. Everything we know comes from people who visited her, from relatives who documented her words, and from researchers who compiled her prophecies after her death. Some argue this makes them unreliable, subject to interpretation and even fabrication. That's a fair criticism. But consider this. The predictions attributed to her have been documented for decades, long before the events they describe came to pass. Many were recorded in the 1970s and 1980s, decades before Trump even entered politics. Let me share something even more specific. According to several sources who documented Baba Vanga's prophecies, she described a vision of America in 2026, where its capital city would be surrounded by protesters, where the military would be called in to maintain order, and where the government would struggle to maintain basic functions. She spoke of a constitutional crisis, of questions about legitimate authority, and of a nation paralyzed by internal conflict. She said this crisis would begin with an event in the early months of 2026, something unexpected that would trigger a cascade of consequences. What could this event be? Baba Vanga wasn't always specific about details, but some interpreters of her prophecies have suggested possibilities. Some believe she was referring to a major terrorist attack on American soil. Others think she foresaw a financial collapse triggered by a cyber attack. Still others interpret her words as predicting a natural disaster so severe that it would overwhelm the government's ability to respond. Whatever the trigger, she was clear that 2026 would be the year when everything changed. She also made predictions about specific regions of America. Baba Vanga spoke of the West Coast being particularly vulnerable in 2026, describing what sounded like major seismic activity. She mentioned fire and water striking simultaneously, which some interpret as earthquakes triggering tsunamis or volcanic activity combined with flooding. California has been experiencing increasing seismic activity, and scientists have long warned that the San Andreas Fault is overdue for a major event. Could 2026 be the year it finally happens? For the Midwest and southern states, Baba Vanga predicted unprecedented storms and flooding. She described waters rising in places that had never flooded before, of cities being inundated and of millions being displaced. Climate scientists are already predicting more severe weather patterns, and the infrastructure in many American cities is not prepared for the kind of extreme events that are becoming more common. But perhaps her most disturbing prediction about America in 2026 concerns food and resources. Baba Vanga spoke of shortages, not because of lack of production, but because of distribution system failures. She described transportation networks breaking down, ports being closed, and supply chains collapsing. She said Americans would experience something they hadn't faced in living memory: genuine scarcity. With the fragility of just-in-time delivery systems, the vulnerability of the electrical grid, and the increasing frequency of cyber attacks on infrastructure, this prediction seems all too plausible. Baba Vanga also had things to say about the rest of the world in 2026 and how it would affect America. She predicted that Europe would face its own crisis, that the European Union would begin to fracture, and that this would have profound implications for American foreign policy and trade. Right now, we're watching economic struggles across Europe, political instability in major nations like France and Germany, and rising nationalism that threatens the EU's cohesion. For Asia, she predicted a major shift in power dynamics in 2026. Baba Vanga spoke of China making aggressive moves that would force America to make difficult choices, of Japan rearming in response to threats, and of India rising as a major player on the world stage. She said these changes would fundamentally alter the balance of power, and that America would struggle to maintain its position as the dominant global force. In the Middle East, her predictions were particularly dark. Baba Vanga spoke of 2026 as a year when conflicts would intensify, when religious tensions would reach new heights, and when the risk of nuclear weapons being used would become very real. She described a specific scenario involving multiple nations, proxy forces, and the real possibility of escalation into a wider war. Current events in the region, including conflicts involving Israel, Iran, Yemen, and Syria, seem to be setting the stage for exactly what she described. Ultimately benefits humanity depends on how we respond to it, how we handle the challenges that arise, and whether we learn the lessons that need to be learned. As we stand here now, watching events unfold that match Baba Vanga's predictions with eerie precision, we have to ask ourselves, if she was right about everything else, should we prepare for what she said about 2026? The signs are all around us. The economy is showing cracks. Society is fragmenting. Climate events are intensifying. Global tensions are rising. Technology is advancing beyond our ability to control it. All the pieces are in place for exactly what she described. So I'm asking you to stay aware, stay informed, and stay prepared. Watch what happens over the next year. Pay attention to the patterns. Notice how events seem to be accelerating towards something. And
people and built incinerators or gas chambers. There was no way in that short period of time any scientist, any mathematician could sit down, calculate and the area. So the laws, just like 9/11, it was all there, planned, and how on earth the third building, which was never hit by the plane, they came down in exactly the same fashion. They've been previously all planned for demolition, wired, with the dynamite, and that's why, these people, they did not, those billionaires, why would they not have their breakfast on that particular day? Why would they claim the insurance way, for those building, unless they knew pre-hand that this was to happen? And when the revenge or their hatred towards Muslims, they wanted to create something, a saga like that, so that they can get the sympathy of Americans who are foolish. And those foolish are still following them, wigging them like a puppy dog. And unless they stop it, there is no hope of peace on this world. And this is specifically to prove that whoever committed genocide, it was Bosnian, see the fate of those people, and the Germans see the fate. Hitler committed suicide, so did the Serbian president committed suicide, the Croatian, and so will, by the grace of Almighty Allah, Donald Trump and his puppy dog Netanyahu, with his Ben Gvir and Smotrich and many others who are there with them, and their facilitators will either commit suicide or they will leave this world in disgrace. यूनिवर्सल टेलीविजन को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें, उसके बाद बेल बटन पे क्लिक करें और अपने कमेंट्स के सेक्शन में अपने कीमती जो ख्यालात का इजहार ज़रूर